The congressional committee investigating the deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol has now subpoenaed House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and 4 other Republican lawmakers. The panel wants to speak to them about the events surrounding the January 6th insurrection as the committee gets ready to hold public hearings next month. Congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane has the story from Capitol Hill.
Nearly a full year into this House Select January 6th committee investigation, there's a new big escalation. A crime and attack unlike any in American history has led to a congressional investigation unlike any other. Now, after nearly 1,000 interviews, the January 6th Select Committee has its sights on 5 Republican congressmen, each of whom has refused to appear voluntarily, including the GOP leader in the House, Kevin McCarthy. The committee knows McCarthy spoke with then-President Trump before, during, and after the attack, something he talked about during an interview with CBS News on January 6th.
I've spoken to the president. I asked him to talk to the nation to tell him to stop this.
McCarthy says the current investigation is not legitimate, and the committee acknowledges these subpoenas mark an unprecedented moment.
An attempted coup and a violent insurrection at the Capitol interrupting the peaceful transfer of power are unprecedented events.
As for the other members called, Alabama's Mo Brooks gave a fiery speech before Trump at the White House ellipse January 6th.
Today is the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass.
The committee says Ohio's Jim Jordan talked to Trump on the 6th and texted White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows earlier about blocking the electoral count, and that Congressman Andy Biggs and Scott Perry were both involved in discussions related to efforts to overturn the 2020 election.
This is all about distracting America from their abysmal record of running America into the ground.
All 5 congressmen have criticized the subpoenas and called the committee politicized, with 7 Democrats and 2 Republicans. The committee hasn't indicated what happens if these congressmen defy the subpoena, whether they'll be referred for contempt of Congress. We do know the committee's first hearing is June 9th, with a final report likely weeks later. Vlad, Anne-Marie.
All right, Scott, thank you very much. Let's bring in Keir Dougall now to break down the legal implications that these subpoenas could have for these lawmakers. He's a CBS News legal contributor. Keir, first of all, it's good to see you, my friend. Long time no see. Good to see you. What kind of information is the House Select Committee hoping to uncover through these subpoenas? And I guess more importantly, do they have teeth? If these congressmen refuse to comply, what can they do next?
Yeah, so I think that introduction is very helpful, sort of setting the table here. There are, it sounds like, a number of conversations with the president, former president, and his former chief of staff that the committee is interested in, efforts to overturn the results of the election. There was an effort to depose the leadership at the Justice Department, which I understand is the subject of the inquiry and these subpoenas as well. So this set of information that the committee is looking at appears to be directly relevant to the events leading up to and during and after the insurrection attempt at the Capitol and the events surrounding the election itself. So it all sounds like it's, effectively meat and potatoes work for investigators looking at those events. That's my take.
And so, to the second part of Vlad's question about whether or not there's any teeth here, I mean, it's one thing to charge Steve Bannon with criminal contempt. It's another thing to pursue those charges against, a sitting lawmaker.
It sure is, Anne-Marie. That's a great question. The Constitution itself provides that each chamber of Congress has the authority to set its own rules, and most importantly here, to punish its own members for misbehavior, for disorderly behavior is the phrase in the Constitution. So there is I think, an important and a serious separation of powers question involving the courts. So if the lawmakers were to file lawsuits to try to quash the subpoena, or if a contempt citation led to a referral to either a court action or to a criminal charge, I think that the question of whether or not the courts effectively have jurisdiction over the misbehavior of one of the chamber's own members is a serious question, which I think would tie up that litigation and the resolution of those issues till well beyond the expiration of this Congress in January. So I think that avenue is troublesome.
And of course,
but then again, that language itself provides the House its own remedy.
And, you know, should things change in terms of the makeup of the House after the midterm elections, who knows how much life will be left in this committee.
Although, at the end of the day, if members of Congress are unwilling to abide by their own rules when they attempt to police themselves, then how can, even if the Republicans do take control of the House, how can then a Democrat feel the need to comply to any subpoena request that a Republican-controlled House of Representatives would issue? I mean, I think at the end of the day, you know, I think the American people are watching this play out, and let's say there are concerns by Republicans that this is political, and yet still, these are the rules that have been established for Congress, and if no one's going to comply, then why should anybody comply, I guess is the question.
Right. Those are great questions. And the framers of our Constitution were well aware that members of a legislature, of a legislative body, either the Senate or the House, could not always be counted upon to uphold the particulars of their oath of office in every respect. And so they specifically placed this provision in the Constitution to give each chamber of Congress the authority to use, the word specifically is punish members for disorderly behavior. And so, yes, there is a larger institutional concern, a longer-term concern about the compliance with the rule of law inside the House itself. And I think the framers wisely deposited that authority in each body, in each particular body, to make its own decisions. And you're right, we will wait to see where this sounds like brinksmanship is going to end up.
Keir Dougall, always great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.